Thank you all so much for coming here in the store. And I know a number of my beloved friends and family are tuning in. And I have just a couple of things I want to say before I actually read. I'm going to read a kind of long story and get as far into it as I can, but I want to make sure that I save time for that last 15 minutes of questions and answers. And I wanted to dedicate the reading to my cousin Min Pagano, who I believe is tuned in from Pittsburgh, and in memory of her husband Paul, my godfather, and they have been like second parents to me. First of all, I want to read a statement from Writers for Democratic Action. There's a national organization called Writers for Democratic Action, and there's a North Carolina chapter, and I'm a member of that chapter. And so in all my readings over the past couple of years, I've been reading this statement. We are writers, we value truth, both the truthfulness of facts and the truth of the human heart. This is our core truth. As citizens of a democracy, we enjoy many precious freedoms, including the freedom to express our views without fear of censorship or reprisal. To guard this and other freedoms, we wholeheartedly accept the responsibilities and duties of citizenship to our local communities, our state, and our nation. Our most important civic duty is to vote. Voting is the fundamental right, but it is also our prime obligation as stewards of democracy. We live in a moment when democracy is under attack, not just in foreign countries, but right here in the United States of America. There are too many politicians and their supporters who would rather simply take power than win it at the ballot box by persuasion and reasoned argument. They would rather many of our citizens did not exercise the right and duty to vote. They make it difficult for certain kinds of citizens to vote, especially the young, the poor, and those in minority communities. They contort voting districts through gerrymandering to guarantee the outcomes they desire. They even seek to manipulate the process of counting and certifying ballots. The only sure way to counter this cynical attack on our democracy is to vote in every election for every office. No matter how inconvenient or frustrating the process can seem, standing in line to cast our vote is the most powerful means we have to keep our democracy alive, to guarantee that the freedoms we now enjoy remain intact and that we indeed offer liberty and justice to all. When you cast your ballot, your vote is irrevocably recorded, booked. It's a simple process, but crucial to our future as free citizens. So please stand with us and do your part. Book your vote. Yours in the spirit of democracy, the North Carolina membership of Writers for Democratic Action Steering Committee, Jill McCorkle, Jackie Shelton Green, Joseph Bathanti, Bland Simpson, Belle Boggs, Thomas Mills, Wiley Cash, Lynn York, Alex Albright, Margaret Bauer, Gabriella Calvo Caresi, Michael Parker, Stephanie Elizondo Greist, and the late Philip Gerard. Thank you. Just one really quick thing. It was mentioned that I co-founded and was the writer in residence at the Asheville VA, which was one of the great honors of my life. And my co-founders here, Dr. Bruce Kelly, behind that pole right over there. None of it would have happened without Bruce. The story is called Rita's Dream. It's the very last story in the book. And the book is narrated by a young man named Fritz Sweeney, whose mother is a splenetic Italian and whose father is a pretty even-keeled philosophical Irishman. In their linked stories, those people appear in each of the 14 stories. Rita's Dream. My mother had a dream about her father, Federico Sciaretta, immolated in the suspect fire well before my birth that destroyed his Station Street cobbler shop. It was custom, almost liturgical among Italians in East Liberty, to summon a bookie and play a number, often a birth date, some scrap commemorating the beloved anytime they dreamt of a deceased relative. My father, Travis Sweeney, did not seem at all a connected guy, an impression he deliberately fostered. Like my mother, he had grown up in East Liberty and knew plenty of mugs who took action. In fact, he knew everyone, about everyone, and preferred a kind of underground anonymity that was not so much cultivated, but inevitable. Yet my mother, Rita, on the surface, not his type at all, had seen through what others were unable to penetrate, and it was to him that she appealed the morning after the dream, when she showed up at Fox's Grill, where he tended bar. She worked next door to the bar as a receptionist in a dentist's office, a square one-story white block pillbox with a golden name launched across the lone rectangular window facing Island Avenue. Sheldon Roth, dentist. Shelley Roth, a slick Jewish guy, educated and elusive, generous, chrismed and dandy, unapologetically friendly and effeminate. On the job, he wore a white tunic, but with panache. It buttoned up the side and fastened high on his neck like he was a baron or a shaman or an ambassador from another planet. The neighborhood leagued him with rackets. Some said he was dangerous. My father said the only thing dangerous about Shelley was his mind. My mother was 23, a graduate of Peabody High School, the dancer Gene Kelly's alma mater, where she had been a swimmer and student of promise, a young woman of wit and resource, certain to make her mark. Yet she had never made it out of the neighborhood. There were things about herself she'd never know. And on that day, December 23rd, 1953, 10 o'clock in the morning, when she stormed into Fox's expressly to request Travis Sweeney, a few years older than she, play a number based on a dream a mere 6 hours old, she would never have said that she had been cheated in the womb or that her attachment to vendetta was pathological. She did not realize these things about herself, nor would she ever, though all her life they would at every turn devil her in those she loved. That day, my mother was neither bitter nor filled with inexplicable fury. It was before she started dyeing her hair, when her smile still had promise, and the things that would by and by become monstrous in her were innocent, sweet, even beautiful. When she was still committed to happiness rather than misery, before her longing gouged a ditch through her heart. She wore a plaid jumper and a red car coat, red gloves with red balls and furs at the fringe, red scarf and red tam, as if she had dressed in the blood of the Yule, to more passionately importune Travis Sweeney. Her eyes were brown, soft, kindness embedded in them. Her hands as well were soft. They would stay that way all her life, even as the rest of her hardened. At the bar perched a string of played-out drummers in low-brimmed fedoras nursing shots and beers, stubbled gray faces pinched around filterless butts. They glanced up at her when she walked in. They knew her and her brothers. They knew her mother and how her father had died. She smiled fearlessly at them. Fox's was dark as a church. Mysterious spangles of light through which dust nebula and reams of smoke wafted hung like tinsel. The TV was on. The search for tomorrow. The stunted lust of the monochromatic early 50s. Christmas music, Santa Baby, Wine Tortually by Eartha Kitt, Bing's White Christmas, the Andrews Sisters, All I Want for Christmas is My Two Front Teeth. Next to the jukebox slouched the dwarfed artificial tree with a dozen pink bulbs and robes of orange blinking lights that strafed the twinkling fifths queued behind the bar. A few sprung booths where people ate macaroni and ham and pickled eggs under a canopy of smoke. Neon beer signs, Straub, Duquesne, Iron City. A grease-splashed framed autographed glossy of Pirate Slugger, Ralph Kiner, knitted at the corners with desiccated Easter poem. Fox's was the last flicker of my parents' childhood, the omniscient threshold of their futures, the final syllables of the prologue they had been languishing in. Travis, my mother said, her voice mixing with the smoke. Hello, Rita. Will you do me a favor? Anything. A cigarette. My father smiled, slipped the scarlet package of Winston's out of his breast pocket, waved his hand over it like a magician, and proffered the pack. 2 cigarettes staggered out of its mouth like a TV ad. He wore a white shirt and pleated gray trousers. He possessed the cobalt blue eyes of a Siamese cat, a full head of furious black hair, and a passionately Pacific temperament. He liked to hang out with black guys in the Hill District and listen to jazz at the Crawford Grill. My mother chose the taller of the 2 cigarettes. My father flicked open a silver Zippo and spun the flywheel over Flint. My mother, the beautiful white cigarette between her bloody red lipstick lips, leaned into the blue flame and took a puff. I want you to play a number for me. She smiled. Please? I thought the cigarette was the favorite. It is, but not the one I came in here for. Can you play a number for me? That's illegal, Rita. I won't tell anyone. I'd do almost anything for you, Rita. What wouldn't you do for me? What I wouldn't do is never tell you no. Then you'll do it? What's the number? She had been awakened in the middle of the night by the unmistakable sound of her father's soft, almost womanly voice, though he had been a man of singular hardness, calling her name, not Rita, but her christened name, Rita, which means beloved, a derivative as well of the Latinate for charity, caritas. A dream, but not really a dream, a vision. You think I'm kidding? My mother asked when my dad smiled bemusedly at her and saw that flash, that slight declension, the rev behind her brown eyes that he would grow so acquainted with in the years to come. He was falling for her, yet he knew that she spelled trouble. He was a scholar of trouble. Loving Rita Sweeney would be his tragic flaw. No, I'm listening, he said, a vision. Don't make fun of me, Travis. I'm not. I'll walk out of here. Please, Rita, continue. I'm not making fun. At the sound of her name from her father's seared mouth, she had bolted upright in her single bed on Omega Street, the house she grew up in. She was surrounded by flames, as if the room itself was on fire, though no heat. In fact, the room had turned inexplicably cold. The white porcelain doorknob turned until released, and there in its naked jam, wearing a suit of smoke, stood my dead cobbler grandfather, my namesake. He walked lockjawed, hands hidden at his back, to her bedside. Behind him burlesqued an entourage of smoldering souls, the convicts of purgatory, writhing in a hurdy-gurdy of agony. Smoke leaked from my grandfather's closed mouth, from his nostrils, his ears. When he removed his gray fedora, a tiny bow on one side of its maroon band, plumes of it flared toward the ceiling. He looked down upon his daughter, Rita, frozen to her little bed, its headboard draped with the rosaries her mother insisted upon. Then above, at the crucifix, the entire room, a reliquary of statues and icons, her dresser and nightstand, Baroque altars of idolatry, a sick box on one wall, holy water font affixed to another. I couldn't move, she told my father. My grandfather had held out his hat, and it flared a nest of glowing red coals. He stirred them with a bare hand, his gray face grinded open. I have no memory of my father speaking to me my whole life. I can't remember a word passed between us. And finally, he's speaking to me. I tried to rise to the sound of his voice, but I couldn't move. And I couldn't figure out what he was saying, something in Italian. I just couldn't make it out. Then Uma, my exotically beautiful gypsy grandmother, given to wearing her dead husband's clothing, who traipsed between the worlds of the living and the dead, who guarded the portal against the dead, burst into the room. My mother could not be sure if Uma was of the dream, or if indeed she had been there in the flesh. Smoke lifted off Federico in white shrouds like holy vapors from the thurible, but instead of frankincense came the stench of charred leather. Uma threw up the sash of the bedroom window. The night stormed in. My grandfather turned his back and walked out of the room. The poor souls of purgatory followed him. My mother was sure she saw the Blessed Mother hovering above the flames they walked through, her blue mantle, the serpent curled about her ankle, the smile, the pact between her and her child, Rita Sharetta. He was about to speak, Travis, to finally say something to me, something that really mattered. I just know it. And then she opened that goddamn window. I wanted to kill her, whether she was there or not. She took a drag off the cigarette as my father stared at her. I want you to play 3/11, March 11th, his birthday and his shop. The shop he died in was 311 Station Street. Okay? My father obliged her with a wry smile that would become his signature for dealing with Rita Sharetta. He didn't believe in those kinds of dreams or the prognostications Italians gave themselves over to in caprice or terror or sentiment. Emotion. He did not give credence to the numinous or fantastic. He did not believe in God, though he understood better than anyone I've ever known that the mystical is often the tide of random, the inexorable erasure of history. Nevertheless, he had been mesmerized by Rita Sharetta's wild tale, the mere fact that she had confided it to him, that she looked so deeply into his eyes and clutched his forearm. He could tell that she was close to breaking down, that she was always close to breaking down, but she wouldn't have given him or those sons of bitches drooling at the bar the satisfaction. She'd walk out on Highland Avenue and fight any one of them. She'd rather take her place at the stake in purgatory than let anyone see her shed a tear. He lit another cigarette and placed it in her mouth. It was 1953. Not quite 5 months since the Korean War had ended. City Lights Bookstore had been founded in San Francisco by Lawrence Ferlinghetti and Peter Martin, something my dad knew all about, but had no one to talk it over with. McCarthy was ransacking America, galvanizing in young men like my father dreams of riding a motorcycle to California, though he knew he never would. He didn't even drive a car. Smart as he was and politically astute, he scoured daily the entire newspaper, had read books and studied history. And despite a practical streak of Black Irish blood, he had no ambition. By the time he and my mother struck their bargain, he was an agent of ennui and even knew the word, though like so many words he reckoned the meaning of, not merely their definitions, he had never uttered it. Nor did my mother possess a speck of ambition. It had all dwindled and disappeared, but she had backbone, something she would accuse my father all their lives together of not possessing. My father was already in love with Rita Sharetta, though she'd swear for the rest of her life that she'd never thought twice about him until that day, 2 days before Christmas in the brutal Pittsburgh winter of 1953. My mother had already made her break with Uma. By all accounts, she had taken her father Federico's death badly, though she had despised him. Whatever might have really happened between my mother and grandmother, a woman I rarely saw, like all the stories moiling together in East Liberty, became irrelevant. A spate of non-speaking became a lifetime of vendetta. So it was my mother who took her dream to Travis Sweeney, and Travis Sweeney who walked out Fox's front door and hatched the deal with Philly Decker, a bookie who loafed outside the bar. Philly had then played the Finn. My mother had handed my father on my dead grandfather's birthday, and it came to pass, as foretold in lore, that the number hit on Christmas Eve for $400, a small fortune, and my mother somehow convinced my father to trek with her to the Jersey Shore for Christmas. Tales of similar magic are not uncommon in East Liberty. My father hadn't wanted to go to New Jersey, but by this time he had his eye on my mother. Initially, he didn't say a word in response to her suggestion that they drive to the ocean in late December. The method he would come to adopt in coping with Rita Sharetta was to humor her, He shot her a politely impassive look, as though he had his fingers crossed behind him. "Okay, Rita," he said pleasantly, not a trace of incredulity in his tone. They left December 24th, 1953, after their shifts had ended. Shelley Roth had insisted they take his 51 black Cadillac to Ville. He sure wasn't going anywhere for Christmas. It was a little surprise, a bit of Christmas cheer. He had stashed a fifth of 4 roses on the front seat. In the same red coat, gloves, scarf, and tam, my mother slid behind the wheel. My father, who would never learn to drive, something my mother never forgave him for, rode shotgun. He had a flashlight and a map. He illustrated for my mother the sagging crimson thread, the Pennsylvania Turnpike that traversed the bottom of Pennsylvania from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. Pennsylvania was a near perfect rectangle, except for its jagged eastern border where it penetrated New York and New Jersey. On the map, it was no larger than an open book of matches. The Atlantic Ocean, aqua blue at the map's edge, was mere inches from Pittsburgh, printed in big black capital letters. My mother had never seen the ocean. She had never been outside of Pittsburgh. And because she could not bring herself to admit this to my father, acted as if she knew exactly where they were going. My father, who had not only seen the Atlantic, but the Pacific as well, sensed this about my mother, but it didn't matter. Neither that she had never seen the ocean, nor that she pretended she had. My mother was dangerous. My father knew that. Bad news, but he couldn't turn away from her. As much fault his as hers. He assured her that as her navigator, he'd keep his eye on that red line on the map, that it would get shorter and shorter as they traveled in the caddy toward that immense pool of blue. And when the road was a nub, no more than a period at the end of a story that smelled the Atlantic, what could be better? She should check in with him every now and then along the way to see how close they were, to see if they were there yet. No one had ever talked to my mother like this. That kind of hushed, unhurried inflection, the patience, that smooth, poetic way of putting things. She was a bit undone. My father's gentleness softened her resolve to tell all the world to go to hell. Yet she couldn't simply dismiss what he had to say as bullshit. Nor did she want to. Had there been anyone else around, she would have told my father off, told him to kiss her ass. But the two of them alone, what would it hurt for him to say such unimaginable things to her? It didn't seem to cost a thing. A minute later, she asked her, "Are we there yet, Travis?" My father's fingers, still on the line, moved slowly, as if not of its own accord, like the planchette on a Ouija board, as the DeVille rolled down Highland Avenue through the heart of East Liberty beneath the flashing Christmas bell garlands on its way to the end of the earth. My father laughed. She turned to him and smirked, an unlit Chesterfield in her mouth. He grabbed a cigarette and lit it, took a drag, and placed it back between her lips. Then he busted the seal on the 4 roses. At this point, there's a gap in the story. A few missing pages. They easily could have hit bad weather and had to detour south. Or they seized on a lark, Florida in 1953. Travis and Rita, 23 and 27, laughing, falling in love in Shelley's caddy, drinking 4 roses, the bookmaker's 4 C notes in Rita's purse, the snow repeating itself in white, ceaseless shreds. Florida, because the ocean there, the same Atlantic that lapped gray and frigid against New Jersey, was warm as bathwater, amethyst blue, the sand was white. My father, in his vagabond days, had bathed in that warm blue water. Or they got lost or drunk. They ended up in West Virginia. Diffident and landlocked, shelved under Pennsylvania, crawling down a deserted, dark, winding road through a blizzard along the frozen Elk River. Florida's tepid turquoise water was in another kingdom entirely. Are we there yet? Rita asked. Not quite, answered my father, but we're close. See that river? He pointed over at the ice-locked hoary elk. It runs into the ocean. The snow dropped a white curtain over the caddy. Blinded, it slid about the road. Massive bucks flanked the rimed shoulder, their racks silhouetted by the headlamps. Along the route out of Pennsylvania and into West Virginia, the road had been littered with deer carcasses. Those bucks terrified my mother. Their wanton abandon, their hobbled death wish. Up ahead burned lights, the town of Darden. From utility pools on abandoned Main Street swung stars and tinsel. Not a soul on the street, but lights burned in all the silent houses lining it. And many of them had strips of colored lights framing their lintels and hanging from the eaves. My mother skidded into a parking lot under a neon sign in busted out purple cursive, Elk Motor Court. A string of blue Christmas lights swagged across the front of the motel. Next door was Kreider's, a plywood store, spliced to a garage, no windows with Esso pumps out front. On the other side of the river, smoke fumed out of the chimneys of little plank houses. Deer congregated on the bank. It cost $3 a night to stay at the Elk. Neither of my parents wanted to use real names, so they checked in as Mr. and Mrs. Charles O'Connor. The room was tiny. One bed with a baby blue chenille spread with a coin box like those attached to the bucking plaster kitty ponies outside the A&P. A dime made the bed vibrate. There was an unraveling fan-backed rattan chair. On the dresser between a Bible and a green-faced alarm clock with a white fluorescent Roman numerals sat a small black and white TV. They left the room quickly and walked over to Kreider's. My mother could barely negotiate the frozen lot in her heels. Up on the mountain, a foot of snow had already fallen. It piled in the valley where they stood in the wind, blowing off the brittle white river. An old man, the long beard and galluses over a brown flannel shirt, slumped behind Kreider's counter. He wore an old-fashioned snap brim like the aged Italian men who stood on the corner of Larmer Avenue and Meadow Street in East Liberty. In the middle of the concrete floor blazed a pot-bellied black wood stove and a pile of split black locust. Next to it was a large cardboard cart. The man asked them where they were from, where they were headed. My father explained that he and my mother were bound for the warm waters of Florida. My dad smiled at him and asked, "Are we close?" The old man smiled back. "I reckon." His voice was gravelly, but the inflection was padded and slow. There was rue in the eyes of those two smiling men, one very old, one very young. As if sharing a not entirely funny joke that only they understood. As if they both knew, had always known, that my father and mother would never reach their destination. This old man, whose look my father recognized, who allowed in that look that he stood where he was behind the counter in Darden because he'd been thwarted himself many years ago in his original desire and destination. Not so much hard luck, but simply the way of it. He had taken his chance. We all choose, just so, not much to tell. Because it was Christmas, because hope and illusion blazed so determinedly about them, the store man wanted to say to my father, whose mind in turn he was reading as well, that everything would be all right. Had he permitted himself to say it, maybe something would have opened up. Not just an opportunity for my mother and father, some windfall, some secret they'd discover, but even more than that, the hidden passage into another world, a staircase leading straight up through the roof and into the snowy mystery of the future. But the man hushed and time stood still. My mother stood next to the stove, holding open her red coat to its warmth, head flung back, eyes closed, long brown hair swinging out from her back. When she opened her eyes, the man was staring at her. Look in that box there, the old man said to her. Came out from around the counter. In the box were 6 baby rabbits, each the size of a coffee cup. They were silvery brown with white blazes on their foreheads. Their eyes were tiny black pearls. They huddled together, twitching on a pink blanket spread on the floor of the box. "Oh my God," my mother said. "Dog killed the mama," said the man. "What will happen to them?" asked my mother. "If they don't die, we'll raise them for the table." "You eat them?" "Yes, ma'am, if they don't die." "May I have one?" My mother turned and looked at the man. My father did not at all want a wild infant rabbit. It was an utterly absurd notion, no less absurd than borrowing Shelley Ross' Cadillac for a trip to New Jersey than Florida and getting stranded in a blizzard in some godforsaken mountain town in West Virginia. Every bit of it predicated on a crazy dream my mother had had about her dead Italian shoemaker father. But the number had hit. There was something to that. My mother was about to turn and ask my father if they could adopt one of the rabbits. He knew that if he did not dig in right then and there, once and for all, and pronounce, "Hell no, Rita, we're not carting that rabbit along with us," then for the duration of his life on earth, he would be powerless against her. He didn't want to lose her, but he didn't know why he wanted her so much, or if he really wanted her at all. How could there be both? Wanting and not wanting. After not even half a day with her, she was already a habit like dope or booze or cigarettes, things people fall in love with that destroy them. The old man was pinned down by my mother's gaze, maybe like my father. He had never really known what he wanted, but Rita Sharetta always knew what she wanted and when she wanted it, even if it was ineffable. And in that moment, just before the old man said, "Yes, ma'am, pick you one out," Rita, still holding to the very last minutes of her girlhood, turned to my father with her beautiful brown eyes and pretty smile. Travis Sweeney accepted my mother, the sacred vow of fatalism to which he had remained forever steadfast. He smiled at her and said, "Of course," before she even opened her mouth. She was bending into the box, and the man added, "It'll be dead before morning." Though my father knew this was true, he put his arm around my mother and the bunny she held in her arms and said, "Maybe not." "We'll take care of him," said my mother. "Yes, we will," added my father. "You got to feed him with an eyedropper," said the man. "We can do that, can't we, Travis?" "Absolutely." The old man looked at my father. He understood every bit of what had just happened. And he wanted my father to know he knew. Not that he condemned my father for it. He would have done the same thing. It was wrong for my father to give his consent on the rabbit. Wrong for the old man to permit it in the first place. He held my father an instant longer in a stare. That little rabbit was going to die. "All right, then," the man said, "I'll fix you up some formula." He disappeared through a door at the back of the store that led to a bay. A car was up on the lift, and under it a man with a mask and a blowtorch. Sparks rained down on him. My parents, the tiny rabbit, and the crook of my mother's arms walked along the dusty shelves. They bought cigarettes, a 6-pack of Tasmanian lager, potato chips, a wedge of hoop cheese bread, and chocolate milk. When the man returned, he had a shoebox padded with rags and a mason jar half filled with white liquid. He handed these to my father and then an eyedropper. Got to feed him every 3 hours. Just this. You give him anything else, you kill him. Don't give him too much. "What's in it?" asked my mother. "Little Karo syrup, sweet condensed milk, some egg yolk. It's to be warm when you give it to him. Remember, nothing else but what's in this. And keep that little thing warm and feed him slow or you'll drown him." "We'll pay for that," my dad offered. "Well, said the man, I'm not giving you much. You'll be dead by morning. They waited for him to say something else. He and my father shook hands. Thank you, said my mother. Then she hugged the man and closed his eyes and held her for a moment. When he came away, he said, don't pet him. They can't take handling. My mother and father turned with their groceries and the trembling rabbit, now held against my mother's breast under her coat, and walked out of the store. Across the road from Kreider's was church. In his front yard, a creche had been set up, statues big as people, cows, sheep too. They were difficult to make out for the pounding snow, the blurred pointillism. The statues moved imperceptibly. They were real people, like a play, out there in the blizzard. Joseph and Mary and the shepherds, real animals, angels with wings and halos, even a real little baby. In awe, Rita and Travis paused and stared. Where are the wise men? My mother asked. They're lost, explained my dad. They won't get here until January 6th. We're not lost. Are we, Travis? No, Rita, we're not lost. Not in any conventional sense. But we're not there yet, are we? No, Rita, maybe not quite, but close. For most people, close is pretty good. Let's stay here, Travis, and wait for the wise men. That moment, Christmas Eve, 1953, Travis Sweeney and Rita Sciaretta, independent of each other, contemplated stepping away from the destiny that awaited them in Pittsburgh and accepting the invitation, that poor little one-horse town ringed by the Appalachian Mountains they couldn't quite see for the snowstorm. Unknowingly, they had stumbled across one of those invisible portals that exist in the mysterious ether, those we walk blindly by day in and out, the entry into another life, in another place, the chance to be better, to be the someone we desperately wish to be, the someone we actually are but don't realize. Through the scrim of snow, they had caught a blurred glimpse of that other life the old man at Kreider's had been on the verge of telling them about. Can somebody tell me the time? So I want to be sure.
6:41.
Okay. I have 4 minutes and I'm going to use it. I want to say that portal is not so otherworldly, not some Twilight Zone-like parallel universe. I want to say that the fare into that other world, the better world, is love. But for that kind of love, the love that chooses happiness over self-immolation, my mother, though she desperately wanted it, was ill-equipped. She simply could not locate the seam bordering love and suffering. My father knew nothing about tending crop or livestock, how to split wood, drive a tractor. He was not that kind of man. He was not physically resourceful. He rarely got dirty, but he was unafraid of the earth he stood on at any given moment, and what it hides and might render. He was about to tell Rita this in those very words, since he realized that something was happening between them, that on that evening, carefully wrought words mattered very much to her, that no one had ever talked to her the way he had, or at least gotten away with it. If he chose his words with precision and passion, I'm unafraid of what the earth hides and might render, she would be his. That is not the end of the story, but I'm going to stop there and urge you to buy the books. And find out. Thanks so much. Thank you.
So what we'll do now is take some questions, and I'll let the virtual audience kind of get warmed up with theirs. Is there one I might be able to get to start us off? Yes.
Hi, Joseph. Thanks so much for being here tonight. I
Thank
want
you.
to know, you write poetry and you write prose. When you sit down to do that, how do you change the way you approach the page and the work at hand?
You know, I try to use the same kind of language. You know, I hope that the prose is infused with that kind of, I don't know, sonic integrity of poetry, that you can hear it. But I'm also very aware that I'm telling a story and that I need to amplify it, and I need to have all those elements of fiction involved, like conflict and crisis and resolution. And I need to move people from place to place to place. I don't feel that sense as much, that narrative kind of pressure when I'm writing poetry. Although my poetry is narrative too, and I'm trying to tell a story there, but part of it is just being in a certain head. I mean, you know, a poem is kind of a sprint, or maybe, you know, it's a 220, maybe it's a quarter mile or something like that. And you know, when you write a story, you have, you know, it's at least a half a marathon. You know, you have to have a little more stamina for it. So those are the ways I approach it. And some things I just don't think that I can get away with in a poem. I just have more to say, and that's why having prose or fiction, etc. And I will say I write nonfiction too. The prose allows me to tell the truth, but lie to amplify that truth. Yeah, yeah, Bruce.
You know, the Act of Contrition is at heart such a love story, and there's always this risk of immolation driven by Rita being who she is, and Rita's dream is there's so much redemption there. I wonder, when in the writing of these stories did you find the redemption, the redemptive sort of driver of that final chapter?
Yeah, that's a great.
Joseph, would you mind repeating the question?
Sure.
So the virtual audience?
Yeah, I
can
will.
hear?
It's very complex, but I will. Oh, I don't need this. That's right. My friend Bruce Kelly asked this question about the book. He talked about the redemptive quality of love throughout the stories. And I think I'm paraphrasing, maybe poorly, and Bruce will correct me. He asked kind of, when did I find that kernel of love to redeem
Redemption
everything?
in that final chapter.
Yeah, this story, which is the last story in the book, might have been the very first one that I wrote. I think it was some years ago. And I wasn't conscious that I was going to write a whole book about Fritz and his family, although I had a book come out in 2007 called The High Art. And this crew is they're there in another linked story. But I didn't want to let go of them because, I mean, they are based on models, and people ask me, like, is this your mom and dad? And I say, no, it's not my mom and dad. You know, I mean, Rita wore go-go boots, I promise. Right, audience in Pittsburgh, my mother never put go-go boots on. Or dyed her hair or dangled from a go-go cage, really, promise. But a lot of it does come from personal experience that I saw maybe in my extended family, how people who really, really loved each other treated each other so dreadfully. And so there's that incredible paradox that sometimes the people we love the very best, we take out our own maybe thwarted desires on them and blame them for every bloody thing that goes wrong in our life. And out of that often comes, you know, not speaking, alienation, etc. So I wanted to end it with this story because this is where Travis and Rita meet, and it is a love story, and all love stories are mixed up, right? Who knows why two people get together and are able to sustain it for years and years and years and years. So I wanted, of course, it's sort of autobiographical too. Joan and I were stranded one time on the way to one of our old cars broke down, as they tended to do, when we were on our way to Pittsburgh, and we ended up at the Elk Motor Court, for goodness sakes, you know, and stranded. And there was a guy in a little grocery store who had bunnies. They might have been ducks. I don't even, they were ducks, but I thought bunnies would be a little more cuddly, you know, Christmas. And so I use that. I mean, this is kind of, you know, it's not a mystery that writers, everybody, you know, quilts together all these fragments of their lives. And I just wanted, and you don't know how the story ends. You don't know how the story ends, but I wanted it to be this kind of epiphanic resurrection. This is how they started. They messed up along the way. You'll see that if you read these, but don't we all? But this is how they started. There was some magic in the relationship, you know. So I don't know if that's a good answer or not. I didn't want it to be, you know, I mean, all books are sad enough, but I wanted it to end in some redemptive, lovely way. How'd I do, buddy? Okay, thanks. Yes.
Could you say something about your Writers for Democracy group?
Sure.
Does the group make statements?
Yeah.
Is research needed by the group?
You know, there.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, okay. The question was, would I say more about the Writers for Democratic Action and what we do? Do we make statements and maybe needs that they might have? It's a national organization, and I don't know where exactly it started. You know, quite possibly New York or a place like that, a bigger cosmopolitan place. And so they began recruiting, I think state by state. I don't know if every state has a chapter, but North Carolina does. North Carolina is, you know, I love North Carolina. It's crawling with writers, and it's crawling with a lot of really righteous, right-minded writers. So I don't know that much more about it. We're going to have a big, giant Zoom meeting September 28th, the whole national crew, basically to urge people in a nonpartisan way to vote, just to get people to vote. Although, please don't imagine me nonpartisan. And imagine how I'm partisan. But more than anything, just to vote, to galvanize young people to get out and vote. We're in the middle, folks, of this horrifying book banning, book burning, libraries being closed, libraries being turned into detention centers, for goodness sakes. I mean, quite literally, curriculum being revamped by people who have no earthly idea what a teacher does in a classroom. You know, I mean, imagine, I don't know, getting a teacher to build your house, you know, or a plumber to take out your teeth or something like that. And I know that's funny, but it's the paradox is just uncanny that this is happening. So I think as much as anything, a lot of us are teachers, you know, we're all writers. And so we're just trying to galvanize people to write to their people, to vote, to look into their local school districts and see what's happening among our children, especially in rural, underserved places. I mean, you're going to get a lot less of that in, say, Charlotte or Asheville or Greensboro. But if you go into the hinterlands, when there's less voice and less cachet from the folks, they get bullied, and kids don't get to read what my kids get to read. And, you know, and so they get this much of it. And so they're trained to be ignorant, to tell you the truth. And that's not the kids' fault. But I forget who it was. You know, it was during World War II, or not before World War II, when, you know, that was one of his first deals, is to burn, to ban things and burn books. And somebody, it might have been Dietrich Bonhoeffer, it was somebody like that who said, you know, we burn books and then we burn people. And whether that's literal, we have literally burnt people, or whether it's symbolic, you know, we're immolating the culture and what's best about us. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, and I didn't mean to proselytize quite like that. But I do think it's important. I mean, it's crucial. I mean, it's utterly crucial.
So we have a question from the virtual audience. This is from Kate. The fierce intimacy with which you write your characters, especially Fred, is breathtaking. Is this a skill that comes naturally to you, or is it something that you consciously seek to develop in your writing process?
Thank you so much, Kate, for that kind comment. I think it's something that you get better at the longer you write. I always like to say I started out writing badly, and then I wrote less badly, and then I wrote less badly. I think a practice is never meteoric for the most part. Sometimes it is, but it's sticking with it. And I'm really fixated on place, and I'm pretty fixated on description. So I want people, and I'm a teacher, so I'm always harping about make your writing cinematic. And all I mean by that is let people see what's going on. Don't tell them what's going on. Let them see people behaving. They know what to think. Just like we do on the street, or if we're having dinner with somebody, if we're in a restaurant, we overhear a conversation, we know what to think. So just show us. And I'm really interested in language. I'm interested in the way words sound too. So, I go back and I write at the sentence level, which is fun for me. I write a sentence and I try to get it right, and then I go on to the next sentence. And then I go back over it all. That's not to say I get it right the first time. So I revise and revise and revise, and I read and read and read, because reading's kind of like watching game films, so to speak, like batting practice.
Question from the live audience?
What are you reading?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Carlow.
I waited to buy the book here, but I read a chapter online last night, Fred.
Is that online?
I think your publisher does a preview of the book,
Oh,
and that chapter
okay.
is online.
I have no problems with that. I'm not freaked by that. I was just wondering.
But it nailed the culture of Pittsburgh as a steel city. In that chapter, I grew up in the other steel city in Pennsylvania, Bathanti.
Oh, sure.
And I was seeing my cousins, my sister, the dog sleeping in the bed.
Okay, great.
And somewhere in the middle of that, you spent some detail on naming and the significance of names. And maybe say a little bit about that, but also I wondered if your name Joseph how that came about.
Yeah, that's
Not that you could repeat that whole,
right.
just the.
Okay.
question.
Okay. Somebody in the live audience, Curly, a friend from Boone, said that he felt I got the steel culture right in Pittsburgh, which, thank you, I'm very flattered by that. My dad was a steel worker. Asked about naming, asked where my name Joseph came from, and that's really extra easy. My dad was Joseph too. One reason why I'm called Joseph often is because my dad was Joe, I was Joseph. It was a way of knowing who was being called by my mother often. My son's Jacob Joseph. Italian families, I think in that period you were like Joe, Mike, Tony, and all the girls' names were Mary, or their middle names were Mary or Ann. So I was interested in that. I wanted people to have Italian names. I don't know, Curly, why I decided to make Travis an Irishman, but I think it was to counterbalance insane Rita, because she's so dyed in the wool, old-fashioned, splenetic, I'll stick this knife in you, Italian kind of woman. I grew up around some of those people. In fact, I never even dated an Italian girl. I was so afraid of it. And that's true. That's the truth. Although my mother was not like that, but she was. You didn't want to mess with her. And my dad was very mellow, and my mother was kind of very splenetic. Although she didn't beat us or knife us or anything like that. They were lovely parents. And again, my dad was a steel worker, so I was around steel all the time. My dad went to the mill every day, like so many other dads who went to the mill. It's just part. top of my dad's car would turn orange and begin to decay from the ore dust from just parking it in the mill. Pittsburgh's a completely different city now. You know, it's just an immaculate, beautiful city, and it's so different. Steel is gone. But I wanted to get that culture because this book is set really before steel quits Pittsburgh. So up until about, I want to say maybe the middle 70s or so is where it ends. And that's when steel just left because of a number of reasons. And I'm also trying to deal very much with class consciousness in this book, you know, the haves and the have-nots, you know, and also, you know, immigrant families, you know, people who showed up here elsewhere, and how they had to deal with, you know, the unkindness, prejudice, and those kinds of things. So just because I know that, you know, I feel like I can authenticate that. I don't have the imagination to create like a new world like Tolkien or somebody like that. I wish I did. I just don't. So I try to reimagine what I know, if that makes sense.
We are at the top of the hour, and I think I had interrupted someone who was asking a question who had not asked, perhaps. If not, this is the last question for this round, and so just in honor of our time, please pose your question. Please repeat the question.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yes. I noticed you have a very slight bit of Pittsburgh accent, perhaps.
I do?
And I wondered if in any way you think that influences your choice of words or rhythm of the writing.
Okay. That's a great question. The question, especially for you Pittsburghers out there behind the, you know, out there in the ether, tell me your name.
Carl.
Yeah, somebody in the audience, Carl, said that he detected a Pittsburgh accent in my, you know, in my delivery, and if that in some ways maybe shapes the delivery. I want to tell a very, very, very quick story on that, and I know time is of the essence. Joan and I were in Bathanti in February, and there were terrible storms. You might have even read about houses falling into the ocean. That was like our neighborhood then. So we had those digital locks, and because of the power outage that we had, the digital locks malfunctioned. So they sent this guy over to fix it. And I was there while he was fixing it. And he gets on the phone to his boss, and the guy must have said, well, what happened? He said, well, you know, this lock's messed up because of the power outage. You know, the power outage. And I said, oh, where could you be from? You know, and he was from Pittsburgh. So I always think like that's not in, I don't talk like that anymore, but I know I do. And especially when I show up around my buddies, we start, you know how you lapse right into the old patois right away. I don't know if it influences my delivery. I mean, I hope it does. I've never tried consciously to do like a Pittsburgh, let me mimic Pittsburgh in one of my characters, nor would I, just because it seems too much like a send up and I'm making fun of it. But I have powerful affection for people who say power outage. And he pegged himself too. I mean, it was like he was suddenly naked. He said, like, I think he said, how could I tell? I was like, come on.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joseph,
Thank you, folks.